All right, the band is back together on this Thursday. This is the F1 podcast. I'm your host, Matt Stopsky, and now I have my good friend, Coach Matt Giannettino here. Matt, you grew the beard out. I'm happy you're following my lead. This is good.
Yeah, listen, just like Trevor Sikkema said, he said, this is the top of the mountain of like what comes next, right? So I was like, I got to follow Matt. Matt is the, he's kind of like the cornerstone of this stuff. So I figured, why not follow you in that sense? And again, thank you so much for making me back cleanup to Austin Gale, Trevor Sikkema, and Solomon Wilcots, respectively. What an honor that is. And I got some big shoes to fill. So thanks again for having me back on in the show that we tend to do together. But thanks again for letting me back clean up to those guys.
Well, I figured that was the right way to do it, right? It's like, no, you're the heavy hitter. So we'll get those guys out the way, and go to you, which
thank you.
Yeah, listen, I would have no other way. You're the guy. You are the guy. So I love the Mickey Mouse hat. This is we're killing it. So you've been listening last week or so in talking receivers. I've been doing receivers for a while now because I redid my entire receiver evaluation process. Both New York teams are in severe need of wide receiver help. And unfortunately, in this free agent period, everyone is already gone. Mike Evans, gone. T. Higgins, gone. Michael Pittman Jr., gone. With the Giants right now, it's Darius Slayton, Wanda Robinson, Jalen Hyatt. With the Jets, it's Garrett Wilson and is that it? I don't really even like
Garrett Wilson.
Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard.
Yeah,
like there really isn't anybody like of significance after Garrett Wilson in terms of the receiving core. But the good thing is Garrett Wilson is better than all three Giants receivers anyway. So it's not like it. What was that?
Combined.
Oh, yes. Yeah. No shit at Darius Slayton or Wanda Robinson or Jalen Hyatt. They're all like solid receivers, but Garrett Wilson's a Pro Bowl of a receiver.
Yeah.
So we have like two different issues here, right? We have one receiver group, which is a full of like solid guys, but no real number one, and a group of literally one guy. So we have to rebuild these kind of differently, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna pull up. Let's do the Jets first because the Jets need some love, and we're gonna give it to them because we're nice people. The New York Jets at the moment have fucking really no cap space. $20 million. That is it. And this is not $20 million in a team that's like ready to roll. This is $20 million in a team that has to fix a bunch of things, including their offensive line.
Yeah.
And I've seen some reports of the last 2 weeks, obviously in Indianapolis with the combine last week, a lot of GMs talking. We saw reports like this is like a good draft for the Jets because it's a draft that's heavy in offensive line and receivers. And while I agree that is true, the chances of your guys hitting the ground running in year one is low, right? The Jets were extremely lucky with Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson just like going off, right? That does not happen.
Sure.
Usually it takes a year for them to really get become impact players, and they need impact players. The offensive line needs a lot of work.
Yeah.
I also saw a report saying that, and then this is like classic fucking Jets fans talk, that the number one problem with the Jets is the backup quarterback. Like the one guy that's not touching the fucking field. That's your biggest problem.
The guy holding the clipboard. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy holding the clipboard. Like that is just a bunch of bullshit, right? Like, we've seen teams of pure depth players. It was called the 2023 New England Patriots, and they got fucking throttled every damn week because they had no one of significance on their team. You don't want that with the Jets. Like, you have Aaron Rodgers, right? No shit if Aaron Rodgers is hurt, you guys aren't going to be good. That's the deal. Like, there is no QB2 in the NFL that is just driving the ship.
Yep.
Like there's Kyle Shanahan that makes QB2s look like they are, but they're just not, right? So like, obviously we're high school coaches, so it's a little different because like, our QB2 is like, an eighth grader. Like,
He's
so
also
like,
a starting wide receiver. Yeah,
exactly. So it's still different. But like, when you hear that, is that just fans? Is that Jet fans being Jet fans? Because it seems a little ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like recency bias, right? Like
Yes.
they're saying this because Rodgers got hurt. He was out the year. They had big expectations. And truthfully, and I don't blame Joe Douglas for this and, Rob Saleh for this, they didn't really have a backup plan because they didn't need to. No one thought Aaron Rodgers was going to tear his Achilles on the fourth play from scrimmage. And so, I don't really blame them, but I see where Jet fans are coming from because they put so much into this and invested so much and had such high expectations that when it happened, unfortunately, there was no one really to back him up. And then I think from the other side of it, from a player standpoint, right? Like, who is the backup is going to who would want to go there? Like, you're never going to play. Like in a situation like Tyrod Taylor with the Giants, like you could say, okay, if Daniel Jones was inconsistent, right? Like maybe there's some possibility there for you to get some snaps. You're familiar with the offense. Fair enough. Like who was going to be that guy that's like, you know what? I can't wait to just sit here all year and not have a chance to play. That would be a competitive type of guy, right?
Right. And why would Aaron want that?
He wouldn't. And that he's the guy who's really running the show. Like let's face it.
Exactly. He's running the show over there. It's not anybody else. It's not Sal. It's not Joe Douglas. It's Aaron Rodgers. And listen, I get it. You sold your soul to a MVP caliber quarterback, and you just have to let it ride. Because what's the point of getting Aaron Rodgers and then fighting against Aaron Rodgers, right? Yeah. You knew what you were signing up for. You might as well ride it out.
Yep.
QB2 is not the guy, right? And I can tell you right now, with the amount of cap space they have and the amount of spots to fill, you're not getting a high QB2. You're going to get a regular QB2. And I'll say this, right? And this might be blasphemous. Zach Wilson is not a bad QB2.
That's right.
What if you guys are just really bad? Yeah. Right? What if the offense was bad? Because Zach Wilson, a former number 2 pick, right? That is usually a pretty good number 2.
Yep.
Behind, most number 2s are guys you're picking in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, right? They're obviously Gardner Minshew being the outlier, but that guy's like Nate Peterman. Nate Peterman's a number QB2, right? Yep. Zach Wilson is not a bad QB2. How many QB2s are you really putting above Zach Wilson? Right, a handful.
Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe he's up there. I mean, you got to say he's up there, right? I mean, and again, I think that was also part of the philosophy, right? That was also the big reason of bringing in an Aaron Rodgers for maybe 3 years to let Zach develop and learn. And he idolizes Aaron Rodgers, right? They have a great relationship, right? There's that mentality too of they didn't think, there was no. Hey, if Zach Wilson plays when Zach Wilson played, that was, hey, break the glass. Zach Wilson's playing.
Right.
Like that. So I don't fault them for that. I think that's really where their philosophy was. And I think Jet fans have to really come to Jesus moment here for a second and really think about that.
Right. And you think about the best QB2 of last year, right? Joe Flacco, who was on the Jets and fucking sucked on the Jets. Again, maybe it's not them. Maybe it's you. That's right. The hard truth of the matter is this is an offense, a team built for Aaron Rodgers. And if Aaron Rodgers is at the helm, this is going to suck, right? It was kind of like the Colts and Peyton Manning. This is an offense built for Peyton Manning. And you put Jim Sorgi in, no matter how good Jim Sorgi is, this is not going to look well. Or it's not going to look good. It's not going to be good. So it's one. I saw that and I just my eyes just rolled. So I strained my eyes for how hard I rolled when I fucking saw that.
Well, and think about it, Matt. How many teams are priding themselves on their QB2 situation?
Not good ones.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So if that's that's the hill you want to die on, Jet fans, then you have to then admit that you're not a good franchise right now. And that's what it comes down to, right? The buck stops at the franchise and the ownership and all these other guys making these decisions. And, again, maybe think about a guy like Alan Lazard who you signed, who was a healthy scratch at points last year. Maybe that was a mistake, right?
Him and Randall Cobb being bad. Him and Randall Cobb being healthy scratches. And you can blame it on, listen, they're Aaron Rodgers boys and maybe they're not that productive. Sure. But I agree. like I kind of actually need to look back now and see who their number 2 was behind
Tim Boyle,
Garrett.
wasn't it? Oh, you're talking about receiver wise.
So receiver wise, like who
was
was
Lazard? It was supposed to be Lazard.
But he wasn't though. Like who they have
Was
out
it
there. It's
was
been
it
a minute.
Xavier Gibson?
I think it was Gibson.
Gibson, sorry.
Technically ended up being Lazard because he had 48 targets and Gibson had 36. And like Gibson's a great story. Like I do love the Gibson story, but like Gibson is not a guy you should be relying on as your receiver, as your second option, right? Like he's a pretty solid, like that's a guy I would be pretty happy with as my third option. You're building up to maybe a second option one day. But yeah, Allen Lazard, even with all the healthy scratches, Allen Lazard still ended up being their number 2 threat as a receiver, and then Randall Cobb, and then Jason Brownlee. Like this is pretty horrible, right? After that, you're looking at this offensive line. Like we're not going to do offensive line right now, but like just I want to look at this team real quick because they got rid of a bunch of guys in this offseason already. A lot of it comes down to where AVT plays, right? AVT, Elijah Vera Tucker is a good player who has just not been healthy, right? And that kind of sucks, right? And this is part of the issue. And like when we talk about the Giants in a second, there's a lot of talk about the Giants spending a draft pick on Joe Alt of Notre Dame, and I love Joe Alt. But at some point, it's like we gotta stop throwing picks at offensive line. Right? Like at some point, you need to get some skill players to get the fucking ball out, right?
Yep.
Because like the offensive line is a unit. It's not an individual one-on-one battle. It's a unit, right? So you can't just keep throwing draft picks. Like you will have a more significant return getting a top playmaker than just continuing to throw at draft picks. Like you can sign guards. They do exist. But like AVT, Joe Tippmann are good players. I know Laken Thompson got released. I think Mekhi Becton's a free agent. I don't think he's coming back. But there's a lot of guys that honestly, I think most of these guys are gone. Like now that I'm looking at it.
Connor McGovern is gone.
McGovern's gone. It's like, it's like I don't even know who they actually
Billy Turner. I think at this point, the only guys under contract would be Wes Schweitzer, right? They have Joe Tippmann, like you had mentioned, Max Mitchell, AVT,
Mitchell,
Carter Warren.
So it's a light group. That is a light group, man.
Yeah.
So let's. If I'm Joe Douglas, I am looking at free agency first with this, right? Like, I don't want a young guy protecting Aaron Rodgers right now. I want someone that, and they don't have to be amazing, right? You don't need to go out and get Joe Thuney. Like, just go out and get proven guys to work within this cohesive unit, and try to build at least an average line. You don't need an elite line with Aaron Rodgers. You need an average line. Yep. And right now, it's Joe Tippmann's coming out again. AVT we haven't really seen the best of yet, but he's going to be good. And that's the same thing. Like this offensive line group, I think you can get them later on anyway. Second round, third round. I don't think you need to go unless if Joe Alt is there at 10 for the Jets. Like, all right, then that's fine. But if not, like, it should be a receiver. And again, looking at this cap space right now at $20 million of cap space, which is not a lot. I think it needs to be a receiver in the draft because, as we were talking about before, the free agent group, the best one right now is arguably Calvin Ridley, and Calvin Ridley is not a guy, in my opinion, worth $17 million a year. And also, they can't afford that.
Right.
So. Right. Like, are you on the same boat? Do you think like it needs to be to the draft, or is there someone in this free agent class that you feel okay with them going out and signing for like $10 million a year?
You're talking about at the receiver position.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the receiver position, I think. I think you look at a guy. The one guy I think of for the Jets, from the free agency class is Odell Beckham Jr. And I say that because you had touched on it. On one of your last shows this week, Odell is still a decent starter. He's not what he once was. Obviously, he has ties to New York. He loves New York. Maybe it's not with the Giants, but maybe it's with the Jets, right? There was conversations last year. Him and Aaron Rodgers are close. I could see Aaron Rodgers recruiting him. But again, like, does Odell want to win a championship, right? Is he on one of those, hey, I'm older in my career, I really want to go to a contender? Do I do that, right? And so I think Odell would be a guy that maybe you look at in free agency that, you could get maybe in a little bit better cost, but the trade-off will be, does he want to go to a contender? And I don't know if the Jets can sit there and say they're a contender right now, even with Aaron Rodgers.
So my dog is barking in the background. I kind of agree with you in terms of like, would this, I think Odell is the best option, right?
Yes.
It's just, can you get Odell there? Spielberg or PFF has Odell at, I think, $7 million a year projected 1-year contract. That I think I had Odell like 8. So it's not like that's not off. If you can get Odell for $7 million, that is a win. That's an absolute win. The question is, do you think Odell looks at the Jets and goes, you know what? I'm that guy. You put me with Aaron Rodgers, we can ride this train. And honestly, the Bills are, considerably weaker going into next year than they were going into 2023, right?
Yep.
Losing, they're not big names, but losing their safety duo in free agency is brutal. Like, that is they were 2 of the best and they're gone. Like, well, they're both one got cut and one's a free agent. Like, that's not great. Yep. I really think this group, the Buffalo Bills are not solid right now. I think they're teetering, probably still the best in the division. But Miami also, same thing. Like, they're lose Christian Wilkins, like, he's gone. They're bringing in they got rid of Vic Fangio. They have a defensive coordinator in there. It's like there's room for the Jets to sneak in and win this division. And if Odell looks and goes, you know what, with me, we get 10 wins, 11 wins with me and Rodgers, we can probably win the division. Then from once you get in the dance, it's anyone's bet. So I agree. I think that would be your best bet, because I don't think Tyler Boyd or Gabe Davis or Darnell Mooney or Curtis Samuel are the guys, right? Or Marquise Brown. Like, Marquise Brown, I think is projected to get, what's his contract? $12 million for Marquise Brown is ridiculous.
Yeah,
like, just get out of here. So I agree. If you can get Odell Beckham Jr., that's the thing, right?
Yep.
If not, and the Jets are sitting at 10, I think there is a world where Rome Odunze falls to 10, or Malik Neighbors. So the receiving group has been very interesting because again, I spent most of the time the last 2 weeks talking about receivers and talking to people about receivers. And I think a lot of feedback on what people are seeing. I think the Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors conversation, who's 1, who's 2, is interesting. But I do think in the end, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the first guy taken. After that, though, there is a world where Rome Odunze jumps Malik Neighbors, which I have seen. I've talked to people and people have said that's a possibility. Again, in the end, it's probably going to be Marvin, Malik, and then
Rome.
Yep. And then if not them, again, we'll talk about this later on, maybe, but like Brock Bowers, possibility for the New York Jets. But if let's say, I'll pose this to you now, you have an option of Rome Odunze or Joe Alt at pick 10 for the New York Jets. Are you going with the Washington, the quick Washington receiver?
No.
You're going Joe Alton?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking the guy with the offensive line background who's a Notre Dame fan, right? So I think it's Joe Alt. I think it has to be Joe Alt. I mean, I think, not just for now. I mean, they have a wide receiver 1, and I understand that Rome would be a great wide receiver 2, but the need is so much greater at that offensive line spot. And again, the investment is in Aaron Rodgers, and you have to protect him first and foremost, especially someone who has injury history older in his career. You have to protect him. And it's got to be with a guy like Joe Alt.
I respect that. I think I would still be tempted to go with Rome because of just how explosive he can be with Garrett Wilson on the other side and Aaron. Because I think when it comes to building offensive line, right, the best thing you do for offensive line, get the ball out quickly, right? And the way you do that is you get receivers around Aaron Rodgers. Now, again, it is Aaron Rodgers. He's going to want to buy time with his feet because he's Aaron Rodgers and he likes to play those games, which at the same time also does not help offensive line. So you can have Dave Bakhtiari back there, but if Aaron's going to spend 3 seconds, run around the pocket, like no one's blocking anyone in the NFL for 3 seconds. So I think I would still go Rome. But at the same time, I understand where you're going with this. And if we're thinking more receiver 2, the nice thing about this receiver class, it is very deep, right?
Yep.
You have guys, but the problem is once you get past Rome, you start running into guys who have considerable weaknesses, right? You're looking at guys like Xavier Worthy, Xavier Leggett, Keon Coleman, Ricky Parasol, who all have some upside, but not the same upside that you would want in Romaduzzi. I think the path for the Jets is through receiver. Because offensive linemen take 3 years to really hit their peak, right? In 3 years, Aaron Rodgers is going to be on CBS. Like, he's just not going to be there, right? Maybe Joe Alt, because Joe Alt is, I think, by far the best offensive lineman in this class.
No doubt.
But if it's not Joe Alt, let's say it's Oli Fachana from Penn State or something, then I'm out. Right. Like I don't like, or
it has to be Joe Alt is what you're saying.
If it's the Oregon State kid or JC Latham or the Penn State kid, like I don't want any, like, no, I'm out on all those kids. Like if it's Joe Alt, then I think it's more of a conversation. Anyone else, receiver, like absolutely all day. But I do, again, receivers think about a year to hit their stride, right? I think there's a better chance of a receiver being a plus starter early on than a offensive tackle being a plus starter early on. And I think you have every year with Aaron Rodgers essentially borrowed time. So 1 year, if they're lucky.
Sure. Well, listen, I think the plan, if I'm the New York Jets, is it's Joe Alt at 10, right? Joe Alt's the guy, like I had mentioned before, the reasons why you go get Joe Alt. It's got to be Joe Alt. If that's the case, I think they do that only if they sign an Odell Beckham in free agency, right? So Odell in free agency, your wide receiver 2. Joe Alt in the draft at 10. They don't have a second round pick because that was what went to Green Bay for Rodgers.
That's right.
In the third round, though, a guy like Jalen Polk, who's also a Washington guy, similar in size to Rome Odunze. Not saying they're the same player.
Right.
But a guy like that in the 70-ish range, right? Top 80 player, that would be a guy that I would target for the Jets in the third round. So at that point, he's your wide receiver 3 with hopes that he's going to be your wide receiver 2 moving forward. And then you still have the bookend tackle in Joe Alt at that point as well. So that to me would be the actual strategy for the Jets in free agency and then into the draft in terms of Odell, Joe Alt, Jalen Polk.
I like it. All right, let's move on to the New York Giants, our favorite team, because we're done, little brother. They're done. The New York Giants have almost $40 million in cap space, which is lovely. But kind of like the New York Jets, they also are in dire need of offensive line help. They cut. Funny enough, Mark Lewinsky, who they cut and who Giants fans despise for whatever reason, he was the highest graded guard or lineman on the team, not named Andrew Thomas, but Andrew Thomas was hurt all last year. I think for the New York Giants, at 6, there's a lot of things being talked about right now. I don't know anything. Again, I don't really ask these questions. I don't want to know these answers, honestly, from the New York Giants, because I like my job and I don't want to. It's better not knowing. But from what I read, it's probably a trade up if they can. But again, if you're going to trade up, you need a trade partner, right? And the Patriots don't. I don't know if the Patriots want to trade back. I think they should, because the Patriots need help literally fucking everywhere, but I don't think they're going to. Arizona's not moving back. Arizona wants Marvin Harrison Jr. They will die for that. They want him. And then after that, it's the Chargers. Not that the Chargers are going to do whatever they want, but I think honestly the Chargers are also not going to be at 5. I think it's going to be Minnesota. I'm thinking they trade for JJ McCarthy, which is just it is what it is.
Go get him. Yeah.
Okay, go please. Honestly, if Kwesi Adofo-Mensah goes out and gets JJ McCarthy, I will thank him personally. For not letting the Giants fuck that up.
I'll reach out to him via email.
Thank you. Much as I like JJ McCarthy, I think he's a tough kid. JJ McCarthy, I don't think is much of an upgrade over Daniel Jones. If I think the only difference is JJ's cheaper, but at the same time, you already paid Daniel. So it's not like you're getting the money back. If it's not Jaden Daniels or Drake May or Caleb Williams, I would just stick with Daniel Jones. Right? You can win with Daniel Jones. All right, we've seen it happen. Right? It's harder, but you can do it. He's a good kid. He's an athletic kid. He can make plays. He's just not that top tier, second tier quarterback. He's really like a third tier guy.
Sure.
With the receiving group, though, I think there's a lot of young talent. Darius Slayton's been the most consistent, which is crazy. So I feel like every year the Giants staff doesn't want to start him, and then he just does. He's like,
he has like
I'm going to do
yards. It. You're like, what?
Yeah, how do you continue to put up 750 yards every year? But he does it. Wanda Robinson came into his own last year, which I loved. Jalen Hyatt is going to get there. I think there's a lot of young talent on that squad, but there's no one they can just go to at the moment. Yeah. And kind of like the Jets, I really don't want to. I wouldn't want to see him spend $17 million a year on Calvin Ridley. Right? Sure. Calvin Ridley, I think, in my opinion, is the best receiver, but he's not that. That is receiver one money, and I don't think that's Calvin anymore. Odell would be my personal pick. I don't know if Odell wants to do that, right? Like, is there still bad blood from it? Like, I know it's not Dave Gettleman anymore. It's Joe Schoen, and him and Joe Schoen don't have any history. But, like, if you were a New York Giant fan, would you welcome Odell back?
Not even a question.
Me too. I would love to see it. Would love to see it.
It would be for me, listen, I think it's like one of those moments where, as a New York sports fan, you've seen it over the years. And, whether guys come in later in their career, like the Rangers have done it, where they bring in these big name guys who they haven't played for the Rangers before, but they end up on the roster at some point at the trade deadline. And you say, wow, Patrick Kane ended up being a New York Ranger, right? Like, but with the Giants, there's that nostalgia factor that I think that part of that is just like, man, like you want that guy back. You love his energy. Obviously, he's a changed, I think, person. I think he still has that same great energy. Obviously, he's not kicking nets and anymore and doing all these things, but I think he'd bring a life back to the Giants. He'd bring an energy back to the Giants that the Giants need right now. So yes, I mean, that's the long or the short of it is I would definitely welcome him back.
Yeah. And he has that ability to take a short pass 80 yards. Like, he still has it. It's not as consistent as it was back when he was younger, but it still shows up in film where he can make big plays, and you need that, right? You need someone that can make big plays for you. It would still be a receiving core by committee, right? It wouldn't be Odell putting up 1,400 yards and the rest of the guys just being there. Like, he would probably still be a sub 1,000 yard receiver, but he would provide the big plays. And if Darren Waller can come back and play and comes back at a relatively high level, we're talking about a very dangerous receiving core with Odell. Outside of Odell, those other guys appeal to me. Honestly, I think Darius Slayton is just as good as any of those guys that we talked about. Marquise Brown, Gabe Davis, or Tyler Boyd. I think same thing with Wando Robinson. Wando and Darius are very close in terms of grading. Yeah. If they were going to add a receiver 3, I probably wouldn't spend it. I wouldn't spend $9 million on it. I would rather just draft somebody. But I think Jalen Hyatt's going to develop into that receiver 3 anyway. Now in the draft, though, if the Giants, let's say the Giants can't trade up, right? Let's say the Giants can't pull it off. We'll do a few scenarios here. The first scenario is the Patriots stay at 3. They draft their quarterback. The Vikings trade up to 5. They get J.J. McCarthy. So it goes Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Marvin Harrison Jr., J.J. McCarthy, and now it's the Giants. So you have Malik Neighbors, Roma Duze, Joe Alt on available for you. Dallas Turner as well if you want to go that route. March 6th, a lot of time left to evaluate these guys. But as of right now, who is your pick and why is it Joe Alt?
Yeah, that was a good one. I think for me, I think it's splitting hairs, right? I mean, Malik Neighbors and Roma Duze, I think it's going to be, it really is. It's a tough situation. I think you saw what Roma Duze did, especially at the combine, was really great. But you look at the pedigree, though, with Malik Neighbors and LSU wide receivers, right, as of late. And again, like maybe if you bring an Odell back in free agency or something for a 1-year deal, LSU pedigree, like I'm sure they know each other. I think Malik Neighbors is the guy. I think they could do so much with Malik. Either way for the Giants, I worry about Malik and Rome in year 1 because I think there's going to be such great pressure on them to develop, and there isn't a number one receiver to really take the pressure away. Like, they are going to be the number one guy. They're going to go up against the best guy out there. Who knows what the running back situation is going to be, if that's a threat to defenses, right? And so I worry about that from a Giants fan expectation standpoint as well, because I think that we have to factor that in, because, as you know, Giant fans, we're getting restless here a little bit. And I think so is ownership. And there's been reports about, obviously how long Dable is going to be around. If it doesn't work out, whatever. But I think, again, just to kind of shorten it up, I think Malik Neighbors would be the guy for me right now. He's a special player, a special talent. But I think I would be okay with Rome Odunze the more I watch him. And obviously he had a great career at Washington. But it'll be interesting for sure. I think it's one of those two guys. I really do. I don't think Dallas Turner is going to be the guy. What would be really interesting to me is, you see what's going on in Buffalo right now, right? With a lot of guys getting cut. Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse just got cut. Tre'Davious White just got cut, right? Gabe Davis is probably not coming back there. They have a cap situation that's crazy. Do the Giants want to reunite Brian Dable and Joe Shane with Stephon Diggs in a trade? Joe Shane has been not a stranger to the trade market. They have a second-round pick from Seattle, which they may want to dangle the carrot. It's kind of an asset that I think, to them is really no loss if they don't have it, right? It was never theirs really to begin with. So maybe you dangle a second and a late rounder for Stephon Diggs. Again, I think that there are some pros and cons with that. Who the quarterback's going to be, he's not happy sometimes with Josh Allen, so God bless you with Daniel Jones or whoever the quarterback's going to be. But that could be a guy, change of scenery, loves the coach, right? Kind of knows the regime. Could that be a phone call that Joe Shane makes to Brandon Beane, and it's a clean slate for both sides? So that could be a possibility, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah, no, so when you said Stephon Diggs, I thought the same thing. He's unhappy with a top 3 quarterback, like how's he going to be with Daniel Jones? And then you also think about Malik Neighbors, who went out publicly and said, the Giants have to figure out their acute situation, and whoever they get, they want to feed me the ball. Like, it's like, all right, not sure this is great in terms of again, Daniel Jones struggled last year, coming off of his best year, and arguably his best year. Honestly, you can argue his rookie year is his best year, but he had one of his better years in 2022. Stephon Diggs, I think, would be great. I think he would, vastly improve his receiving core. I think it would help out Daniel Jones. Would the personalities mesh? I don't know. I think the same thing about Malik Neighbors. With the personalities mesh? I don't know. And when I look at Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, the interesting thing is I think Rome is actually a better prospect long term. I think Malik is a better prospect today,
I agree.
which is I think is interesting. I think they actually flip over time.
Yep.
So the question becomes all right, do I want someone that's going to be, a potentially all-pro receiver today, or do I want someone who's going to be an all-pro receiver in year 3 through 6? How do I want to look at that?
Right. But maybe if they don't have the quarterback situation figured out, really, in a sense, maybe Rome is that guy, right? And maybe they don't want a guy who publicly is saying we need the Giants to figure out their quarterback situation, right?
Right.
Because we all know that, right? And we all agree as fans, but for a guy who's not even in the league yet to say that, and to your point, I think the upside on Rome is a little bit higher. Maybe it gives them that flexibility and timing to really take a guy like Rome and be patient in that sense.
Yeah. And I also want to make it very clear that Daniel Jones is not a bad quarterback. He's if you of the QBs that are available today, I don't know if any outside Kirk Cousins, I don't think they are better than Daniel Jones, right? I wouldn't put Ryan Tannehill over Daniel Jones. Russell Wilson wouldn't put over Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is a solid quarterback, right? He's not, listen, he has his flaws. We all know that, but he's a good quarterback. And if you're you know what, we already have 2 guys that might not be good with him. I think I'd rather go with Rome.
And he's never been, Matt, he's never been protected ever.
No, never.
Right?
And whether that's scheme or line, I agree. He has never been protective. And it kind of goes back to that question. No, is throwing more offensive line going to help Daniel Jones, or is getting a receiving core where you get the ball out faster going to help Daniel Jones? I think it might be the receiving core, because
I agree.
Because let's say you throw Joe Alt in there, and Joe Alt plays right guard for a year while Evan Neal tries that right tackle for one more time, and Andrew Thomas comes back from that injury. A really a hard year for him. Where, listen, kudos to Andrew Thomas. He played his balls off. He really tried to do his best. And he to come back at left tackle. Then you have John Schmitz at center, who had a rough year, but like people forget that Frank Ragnow had one of the worst rookie years as a center, and now is arguably with Jason Kelsey retired. Between him and Creed Humphrey are the two best centers in the game. And then you have you have an open left guard spot for whoever is going to play left guard for the New York Giants. I think you put Rome in there instead, and Rome, who we know is a quick player who has he showed in his agility drills. He's a quick player. It was excellent hands. Maybe that's the kind of guy you want, right? That's kind of fits the mold, and also a big target. Dude's 6'3", 212 pounds, and he runs like a slot receiver. Like that's what you want, right? And Malik Neighbors, we don't even know what he does yet. He's we think he's 6 foot, right, and we think he's 201 pounds. Like, he didn't do anything in Indianapolis. Like, he didn't even weigh in. Like, my man came for the St. Elmo's shrimp cocktail and left. Well, that was it. So he bailed. So
exactly.
So I don't know what's going to happen there with them. So I think if it was me at pick 6, I think I would probably, if I couldn't trade up, I think I would probably try to trade down, but no one's going to want to trade down if Marvin Harrison Jr. is gone, all 4 quarterbacks are gone. If I had to make a pick, I think I would go Remo Odunze at pick 6. I think that would be a better option. So not because I don't think Rome's going to be a bad first-year player. I think he still has a possibility to be a Pro Bowler his first year. I just think Malik has a chance to really hit the ground running and be like an all-pro in his first year because of how productive he was at LSU.
Yeah, no, listen, I don't disagree with that at all. I think, I think when you're talking about it, I think, Rome Odunze, I think, is that better upside guy, to your point, and obviously hearing Trevor talk about it the other day of that there's that other piece of it too, right? Where you don't know what the issue is in terms of they're so close together. Why didn't Malik Neighbors go into the combine, right, and compete? Is it because he didn't want to hurt himself, right? Similar to kind of why didn't Marvin Harrison, perform at the combine? Was it a similar type reason? And who knows? I mean, now to me, it gets a little wacky with this stuff that happens with opt-outs and all these different things. But again, you add on top of to your point with Malik Neighbors saying the Giants got to figure out their quarterback situation, and then you don't test at the combine, and Brian Daboll loves me and all this stuff. It's all right, relax. You know what I mean?
Yeah, relax. Listen, if he ends up being if whoever's being a New York Giant, we're gonna love. We're gonna embrace him open arms. We're very excited to have him. But March 6th, while none of them are New York Giants, I think I'd go with Rome, just based on what I see on tape and how I feel he would do with the New York Giants. It'd also be nice to have a decent sized receiver again, because we just have not had those. Well, that's what we had was Kenny Galladay, and Kenny Galladay. Oh,
well, that's
Oh God, Kenny. Yeah. Well, and ended up being a meme in the end. That was rough. But that's the receivers. We'll look at. I'm going to do safeties over the weekend because obviously X leaving, not being tagged, so we don't know if he's going to go anywhere. I think from talking to people, the consensus that X is going to be gone, which really sucks because I really like Xavier McKinney, and he played one of the best safeties in the league last year. So to lose him is rough. So I'll be looking at the safeties next week, and then for safeties in the draft, it's Cooper DeJean, and he's a borderline corner, kind of more like he's more like Kyle Hamilton or Micah Fitzpatrick than he was like a true safety. But we'll talk about him next week and see what's up. But either way, the Giants, this is a very important offseason for both the Giants and the Jets. The Giants, I don't want to say these are make or break years, but it's kind of the Giants just need to get better, right? They need to show improvement. And I think last year was a weird year. We know it was a weird year. We knew the schedule was going to be hard. You and I looked at the roster at the beginning of the year. We knew it was going to be a rough roster. There was still turnover from the Gelman administration that Shane had to work through. And I do think that first year of winning a playoff game kind of hurt him a little bit because he had to commit to some guys he probably wouldn't have committed to. Yeah. So I think we just need to see positive growth in the New York Giants. I think we will have a lot of faith in Brian Daboll, his staff, and Joe Shane. For the Jets, though, like it's Super Bowl or bust. Like any player that can't help you today, I wouldn't even put in the building.
Yeah,
like, that's it. Like that's why if I'm drafting them the New York Jets, I'm looking at not the draft grade. I'm looking at his first year grade. What do we think he's going to be today? Because if it's not a plus starter or something that's going to slide in and be a starter or a high rotational player immediately, I don't want him. Get him out.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be interesting, and obviously Monday starts the madness.
Oh, I fucking love it. It's my favorite. March might be my favorite month of the year.
March is March Madness.
Well, it's because obviously you had the basketball stuff, but like free agency builds the draft. You know what I mean? Like I love the draft. It's like, 3 of the greatest days of the year. Beats Christmas, beats Passover easily. It's one of the 3 best days of the year is the draft. But what sets up that 3 best days is free agency, and that comes Monday. And we're seeing guys just get cut and signed and restructured left and right. And I'm pumped. I can't wait for Monday. Coach, it's good seeing you again. We will see you next week. We might be breaking down some signings next week. Actually, that might be all right. I can't wait to see you now. What was that?
We're cooking now.
We're cooking, baby. We're cooking with gas. Here we go. New York Giants, NFC East champs 2024. We're calling it now.
Slow down, Malik neighbors.
All right. Sorry. I'll pull it back. New York Jets, 3rd place, AFC East 2024. But we'll enjoy this week. Enjoy your weekend, dude.
Yeah.
And get the popcorn ready.